Today's show is sponsored by Earth Friendly Products. For over 40 years, Earth Friendly Products brought you the greenest home products for all your family needs. Learn more at ecos.com. That's ecos.com. Now, let's get to the show. Today's show.
What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Welcome back to Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and along with me now, world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor.
Thank you, Tony Sweet. Today, all the way from Switzerland, we're talking with Erich Von Daniken. You know Erich from the recent success of the Ancient Alien series on the History Channel.
For over 45 years, Erich Von Daniken has pursued a theory that Earth might have been visited by extraterrestrials in the remote past. And I have to say, I'm in total agreement with his hypothesis.
I feel the same way you do. Erich is the most successful nonfiction writer of all time, with 55 books in this exact subject. And to date, he sold over 65 million copies, Tony, worldwide.
That's a lot.
Erich's most successful book, Chariots of the Gods, was an immediate bestseller in the United States, Germany, and 38 other countries. And later on, it went on to be a one-hour special filmed all over the world entitled Chariots of the Gods, The Mysteries Continue. Erich Von Daniken's latest book is Twilight of the Gods, the Mayan Calendar and the Return of the Extraterrestrials. In this book, he investigates the mysteries surrounding the Mayan calendar and its amazing connection to the ancient astronaut theory.
I know we all can learn a lot from his wisdom, research, and years of traveling the world to essentially bring audiences and fans the truth.
I think so too. So Tony and I invite you to visit Erich's website at Daniken.com, DANIKEN.com. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please put your hands together and welcome all the way from Switzerland, our friend Erich Von Daniken.
Welcome, welcome, Erich.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Finally. And I have to say, I want to call him Mr. Van Daniken, so but I hope it's okay to call you Erich.
That's okay, of course. My name is Erich.
Okay, good. That's good. So, okay, you know, our show is called Truth Be Told, where an experience becomes truth. And my first question to you is, what experiences really brought you the truth in your career when it comes to extraterrestrials?
You know, in the meantime, I'm 80 years old. But a long time ago, when I was a boy in Switzerland, I was educated in a strict Catholic boarding school led by Jesuits. Of course, I was a deep believer in God. I am still a believer in God, by the way. But at that time, when I was a 16-year-old boy, God had to have some qualities. For example, God would never use a vehicle in which to move around from point A to point B. God is all over. Or God makes no mistakes, etc., and so on. Now, in this boarding school, we had to translate parts of the Bible, Latin to Greek to German. And then I realized that in the Bible, the God there is using a vehicle in which to move around from point A to point B. A vehicle which descends with smoke and fire and loud noise and trembling and so on. So I simply had doubts in my own religious education. And I wanted to know if other communities in antiquity have similar experiences as we have it in the Christian Jewish world. And that was the beginning of Chariots of the Gods.
Well, wow. I mean, it's amazing to hear at that age that you were already questioning. So apparently this was a divine intervention, because most people here, especially in America, at 4 years old up to 18, they're pretty much told exactly how to feel, and you may question it, but you don't really seek out and explore until after you get out of the nest. So when you started writing the Chariots of the Gods, what was your first experience that really shocked you or brought you, or really the joy that you knew something was different and you finally found something that you believed in?
You see, from my family in Switzerland, I came from the hotel business. So after my school, I first went into the hotel business. I was for a short time, I was a waiter, I was a cook, I was sitting at the reception. Of course, I made hotel schools. And when Chariots of the Gods, the manuscript was finished, I was the manager of a 5-star hotel in Switzerland. That was in 1966. And then I sent the manuscript to at least 20 German publishers. And all of them sent it back to me. All, we regress. It's not useful, it's not scientific, etc., etc. I was really shocked. Finally, some German publishing houses tried it with a very little edition of 3,000 copies. And the book was on the market and it exploded. It was simply fantastic. Of course, I was attacked. Of course, I was criticized. And sometimes it was right to criticize me because I made some mistakes and errors and so. In other times, it was not right. So that's the way somebody lives. I had to understand and to learn that it is normal in our society and in our democracy to be criticized. Nobody just has the right. It's not by order du mufti, we say, that you have to order something now. We have to listen to the critics, and then finally we have to correct some of our thinkings. And after a long time, as I said in the mini, I'm 80 years old. After a long time, you know for sure, well, this is correct and this was wrong.
Well, and how long did it take you before you were able to feel comfortable with that type of criticism, Erich? Meaning, you were younger then, of course, and then so your book comes out. It's a sensation immediately. But how long did it take you to get past that part where you're criticized very heavily, and until you could just let it roll off your back?
Well, at least 10 years. You see, I had to learn that some of the things which I wrote in Chariots of the Gods were definitely wrong. Look, a few examples, for example.
Sure.
In Chariots of the Gods, I wrote that in Egypt, on the Nile in Upper Egypt, there is a small island, and this island has the name Elephantine. And I wrote in Chariots of the Gods, the name Elephantine comes because seen from the air, the island has the shape of an elephant, which was completely nonsense. At that time, when I was up there, some scientists told me that. Later I found out that this is rubbish. The island has not the shape of an elephant. It simply has the name elephant because elephants were living on the island. Or in a temple in Delhi, in India, there is an iron pillar, and I was there, of course, and the guides told me this iron pillar is not rusting. So I speculated, why? Not rusting, and it is some hundred of years old. Is it maybe a mixture of whatever made by extraterrestrials? Now, in the meantime, this damn thing is rusting. So I was wrong. But definitely, I was right in another way. I always said this planet was visited by beings from outside long time ago. And our ancestors at that time were Stone Age people. They could not understand what was going on. And erroneously, they thought that these beings from outer space are the gods. We all know that there are no gods. It's just a misunderstanding. So, but that was the beginning of everything. And these extraterrestrials, some at least 14,000 years ago, they behaved themselves as today's ethnologists would do. They studied a few tribes, they learned a few language. Finally, they disappeared again, but they promised to some of our humans, we will return in a far future. And this promise of return is still today part of every religion.
Wow. Well, my question, there's a lot of different sites all over the world, from here in America, South America, everywhere, and of the evidence, is there evidence in every single site of a certain age that has extraterrestrial evidence, or do you feel that some sites around the world were just, culture that just happened to evolve themselves?
Let me start with an example. I just come right to your point. We live in a Christian society, and this Christian society has created a wonderful culture. For example, we have wonderful churches, we have cathedrals with gigantic paintings with gold on it, we have high altars, side altars, etc. on. But none of the architects, none of the artists who created these marvels were alive in the time of Jesus Christ. Nobody was an eyewitness then. They all have done their gigantic work because of tradition. So I said to myself, if really some thousands of years our Stone Age people were visited by beings from outer space, they must have chiseled these gods or painted these gods because it was expressive for them. And we should find these gods worldwide. So I went out traveling, filming, photographing, and looking for these remnants or these indications which speak for the gods. The world is full of it. I know it because I have published so many books about it. The other case of indication comes out from the old literature. You see, normally, every normal anthropologist or archaeologist say, okay, our ancestors, they worshipped the gods. Which gods? The normal answer is the gods in nature. Our ancestors were afraid of the lightning. They could not understand what an earthquake was. They could not understand why the moon sometimes is on the heaven shining bright and then it disappears, etc. So the first religions definitely were natural religions. But then comes something in plus. The gods were talking. The gods were speaking. Information was given to the humans, and scientific information, for example, concerning astronomy, concerning the calendar. Now, nature, the earthquake, the lightning, all this does not give scientific information. So we have to differentiate these things. And the antique literature, in some cases, you clearly find references to the extraterrestrials.
Erich, why do you think so many people are afraid of the extraterrestrials? I mean, I understand like 5 generations, brainwashing, and how and enormous lies that governments tell their people. I understand all of that. But what do you think deep down? Like, I'm not afraid of it. I've seen ships. I've seen things that a lot of people haven't seen. And so I know with our Truth Be Told segment, that when you have an experience with it, then your belief changes, obviously. But I'm curious, from your wonderful perspective, why do you think so many humans are afraid, or do you think they're afraid at all?
You see, it has to do with our education. Generally spoken, we have 2 groups of humans on our planet. One group is religious. It doesn't matter what sort of religion. The religious group believes that God made everything. God made the universe, God made the planets, God made the plants, the trees, the animals, but finally, as crown of creation, God made us. The second group is the scientific community. They say everything is explainable by evolution, mutation, selection. But we today, we are the top of evolution. So in both cases, if you look at us as religiously, we are the crown of creation, or scientifically, we are the top of evolution. In both cases, we look to ourselves as the greatest. Something so great and fantastic like us does not exist out there anymore. It's a question of psychology. We don't want these extraterrestrials. As soon as we accept them, we are not the greatest anymore.
Wow. That makes total sense.
Especially in the United States, because we still think we're the greatest country in the world. And I'm like, hello, wake up, people. There's something to be learned here.
Well, when we were talking about the sites all over the world and
Machu Picchu,
but you've traveled pretty much to every site I think on this planet. So which side do you feel that has the most evidence? Because we always hear Egypt.
Yeah.
But is Egypt actually the one that has the most evidence of extraterrestrial?
Well, yes and no. Egypt is complicated because in Egypt we could discuss so many things. Now, just concentrate shortly to the pyramid. Of course, I know all the archaeological literature about the pyramids. Of course, I know that these respectful archaeologists believe that he was a pharaoh with the name of Cheops, about the 4,500 years in the past from now on, who was the constructor and the builder of the Great Pyramid. So far, it's clear. But this Cheops had a father. His father was Snorfu, and Snorfu was a Stone Age man, a Stone Age figure. In Cheops' time, they came up with iron, maybe with copper. Now, inside the Great Pyramid, we know in the meantime, and this is new knowledge, that there are much more channels, shifts, rooms than we thought before. All this means planning, engineering planning, and this planning does not fit to Cheops. It doesn't fit in his time because all the planning, the design, the calculation have to be made before the starting of the pyramid. Now what archaeologists don't know or do not take into the consideration, there are Arabian historians, for example, Ibrahim Abdul al-Makrizi or al-Mas'udi. There are people who wrote stories some hundreds and thousands of years ago. Al-Makrizi says the Great Pyramid was constructed before the Great Flood by a king with the name of Saurit. And they say Saurit is the same figure which the Hebrew community calls Enoch. Now, Enoch, again, is a figure, I know him perfectly. He could be my brother because he was in contact with extraterrestrials. That's another story. Now, concerning the pyramid, that's that. But in South America, we have an archaeological site which is called Puma Punku. I was there already in 1962 the first time. No tourists were there, nowhere. And in Puma Punku, you find gigantic platforms. Gigantic, I mean 180 tons weight. Absolutely chiseled and polished and so on. Now, local archaeology believes, well, it was the Aymara who did it. But the Aymara, that's an Indian tribe, they were Stone Age people. Stone Age people had no a possibility to transport, to polish, to chisel these gigantic blocks and to fit them together. Now, 450 years, when the Spanish conquerors came there in the highland of Bolivia, they stood before these great blocks and they asked the locals, and the Inca, the ruler, was there too. They asked the locals, who made this? Not even we Spanish will be able to do this. And the locals said, it was done in one night by the gods. So which gods? That's again the question.
Well, I think there is a wonderful quote that you were talking about in this, and it says, "Could God be an extraterrestrial?" And I'm starting to believe now because I grew up in the Midwest and Christian but the gods of the Greek culture is starting to really interest me because there were so many for so many different reasons and their technology that they had. And so when I started watching Ancient Aliens, it really started making sense to me because I'm thinking, how did these people even create this in their mind of what they believed that these gods had? And is that something that is more making sense now of the Greek gods that could have been extraterrestrials?
Of course, in many cases, the gods were astronauts. But finally, you do not lose the real God. Look, just for 1 minute in my favor, let's think I would be right. So we would have been visited by beings from outer space. So the next question is, where do they come from? What is their evolution? Now you can say they have been influenced by another solar system too. Okay, what the others? So you can continue this game for millions of years, it doesn't matter. Finally, you arrive in a starting point. And there, with respect and with the religions, you say, here is God. But God is something which we have no definition. I don't know what God is, but I know that the universe does exist. All these trillions of stars are here. We are here. And it must be a beginning somewhere. In religion, you say, in the beginning was God, and God was the Word. But what created God? Or in science, you say, in the beginning was the Big Bang. Wonderful, but what created the Big Bang? So we have no idea, neither in philosophy nor in science, what the beginning was. And I say this was what we call God in every respect with religion.
So which, out of all of the cultures across the globe, which culture, present or past, in your opinion, Erich, do you think has probably the purest connection to the extraterrestrials?
I cannot name the culture because I don't know it. Look, we have old Indian writings in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata, this is a gigantic Indian tradition, thousands of years ago. And in the 5th book of the Mahabharata, some extraterrestrials came down. Of course, the old Indians do not call them extraterrestrials. They call them guardians of the sky or watchmen of the sky. Some of these humans at that time had contact with them, and they even learned their language. And some of the old Indians asked them, where do you come from? And they say, we come from a faraway solar system. They explain it. We don't know which culture existed at that time in ancient India, because when we can even not date, is it 3,000, is it 6,000 years ago? We don't know. The same thing happened with Enoch. Enoch is a figure which you find in the Bible, in the Old Testament, very shortly, just 2 phrases. It says that Enoch was the 7th patriarch before the great flood, and Enoch was the first human who disappeared in a fiery chariot into heaven. That's all what's in the Bible. But in Ethiopia, in an old library, some 170 years ago, a British man found a book with the name The Book of Enoch, written in the first person from an eyewitness. And Enoch explains exactly what happened at that time. He was taken up to the sky, he came together with them, he learns their language, and so on, similar to the old Indian. Now again, we don't know to what culture was this Enoch. Today we say Enoch was a Hebrew. Okay, but what was it before the great flood? When was the great flood? So they are still hanging full of question marks.
You know, back in the day, I can remember Shirley MacLaine, her books Out on a Limb, and different things in her interactions with extraterrestrials or the belief of that. And when she went to Machu Picchu and all the criticism she got as a result of it, and she went into the book and the movie, she talked about Atlantis, and she talked about how there were such things back in the time of intergalactic exchange programs, just like we have Italian students come to the United States and Americans going to China as exchange students, that there was an intergalactic exchange student program that was going on with extraterrestrials in Atlantis. What do you think about that?
She's perfectly right. That's exactly. I met her, by the way, once, very short. We met together. We had about a 15 minutes discussion. And she told me that's already then. And I said, Mrs. MacLaine, this is wonderful, and that's the truth. But what is missing? A scientific proof. We know this from old traditions. We know this from part because some shamans, they tell us old story. We know that it was the way. There was an intergalactical or intercosmical exchange of knowledge with ETs. I even believe this still goes on today. That's another story.
I do too.
But Shirley MacLaine was right. I absolutely underline this.
You know, there's something to be said. I like the scientific proof. I'm somewhat of a skeptic. I want to think of myself as a healthy skeptic. I have an open mind. I want to hear, that's why I'm not just Democratic or just Republican. I want to hear everybody's perspective. But what I love to go on is exactly what Shirley has and what you have, Erich, and that is you have this passion and this electricity and this desire in your heart, your mind, and your soul. You can feel your electricity in every molecule of your being to get this information out to the world. And I feel like as a humanity, we keep getting further and further and further away from other people's truth. And we'll stand, on our soapbox and we'll point our finger and we'll just keep regurgitating what our parents told us and what their parents told them. And what you're bringing to the table is not what anybody's parents told you. It is what you have researched scientifically to find proof about and then expand your mind and your heart and then go way out in a brave way on a limb and bring us this information. That's why Tony and I love doing this show.
Yeah. You see, I have published so many books. I have written so many books. And sometimes because I speak 4 languages, sometimes I had to read one of my own books in another translation, for example, in French. So I read it and I ask myself, Eric, where did you get this information from? And the information is there, and the source is correct. It is a fact. You see, what I write in my books, everyone can control. When I say we have this and this temple and this figure there and there at the Maya land or in Egypt, you can go there, you can touch it and photograph it. Or when I say in such and such old book in this literature, you can find this connection with extraterrestrials, you can control it. But sometimes I don't know myself where I have my information from. Every night when I lie in my bed, I still pray. I see the universe. I see the stars. They move in my consciousness. And I'm a little teeny microscopic part of these gigantic waves. And sometimes I have the information, the feeling some information comes from there. But this is not scientific. This is just feeling.
And feeling, I think, is so underrated, don't you?
Yeah, really. And it's important for me, at least.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a firm believer that our feelings can create 99.99% of our reality, meaning our action, our words, yeah, they're impactful, and our thoughts obviously create our reality. But if you don't feel the electricity in a good way while you're thinking the thoughts and taking the action, then you're just sort of running against a wind machine wearing a tar and feather suit.
Yeah, that's exactly. And you see, there is always something which I call the spirit of time. Of course, something like a real spirit does not exist, but the spirit of time is still existing. What is the spirit of time? You can say nothing worldwide when the majority of the scientific community is not accepting it. For example, let's say the Pope in Rome. He's a respectful personality, and his word has certain weight. If the Pope would announce tomorrow, yesterday night I had a 2-hour discussion with an extraterrestrial. Now the spirit of time, his own bishops and people, his own believers will say, what's wrong with the Pope? How can he say such? How can he make such an announcement? So it's only possible to change the world when you arrive to change at least a little part of the scientific community. And then you change the journalists. And when you have the journalists, then you'll slowly have the public. So in my case, as I said, I have over nearly 70 million people who bought my books. But this is still nothing compared to this gigantic and beautiful world in which we live. We have a lot to do, and my job is to change the spirit of time.
But I think even in America, if the second coming of Christ actually came down, probably about 99% of the people wouldn't believe it was him anyway.
And they'd probably kill him, actually.
They probably would. I want to get a little scientific, and it may be or may not be, but if you look at a map of the world and in the equator and then little north, little south, it seems to be a lot of the historical sites are in the same kind of perimeter. Is there a reason for that?
Well, it's all about south and north, about to the 23rd degrees south and north of the equator. I think it was a question of the climate. I live in Switzerland, and some 10,000, 15,000 years ago, Switzerland was a catastrophe. It was a jungle. It was ice. It had glaciers. The climate did not allow to create high cultures. Our ancestors were Stone Age people. But there, around the equator, left and right, it was warmer. The climate must have been different.
That makes sense.
And, on a side note, which is connected to what Tony was saying, I'm taking a group of people to Machu Picchu in Peru in May of next year. It'll be my 4th time taking a group. What advice do you have for us? It's an open-minded group. They're obviously interested in any of that. I've been there many times, and I've seen things and experienced things, from past life bleed-throughs to seeing things that you're not supposed to see in my mind's eye, and so did the shamans we were working with and our tour guide, Abelardo. What thing would you encourage us to do while we're there, whether it's a mind, body, spirit thing or a location?
The first thing you can make clear to your tourists that you have two different sorts of stones in Machu Picchu. You have the Inca walls. You recognize Inca kind of building walls immediately.
Yes.
And under the Inca, you have gigantic Stone Age block, megalithes. So that's the difference. Why should the most ancient blocks be the most perfect one and the most heaviest one? And you start your trip to Machu Picchu anyhow from Cusco. So go to Cusco. There is this gigantic wall of Sexayuman.
Yeah.
Now turn your back to this wall of Sexayuman and just work about 200-300 meters away where the tourists normally don't go. There you find rocks, cut, chiseled, rocks which stand upside down. You have some stairs on the ceiling. Nobody can work on the ceiling. And all these things. You have to show your group this. Then you learn to be astonished again.
Oh, my God. I'm so excited already.
Well, you know how...
You see, when you have a tourist guide there, tell him he should bring you to the Kenko Grande. Kenko Grande.
Okay.
It's just 150 meters or 200 meters away from the Inca wall. And then let your tourists go into the Kenko Grande and around it to all these rocks. It's absolutely crazy. It's really, there are 100, 200 tons of weight just moved by somebody, chiseled by somebody, and this must be Stone Age. So we don't understand it.
You know, I just also heard and saw some video footage of this, and I think it was in Turkey, I hope that's correct, where they just found miles and miles and miles of underground tunnels and living spaces where they would have their wine. They had the big hole in the earth that comes down. That was their ventilation system, and it had a modern plumbing system in there. And it's thousands of years old, and they just discovered it.
I know this because next week I'm there in Turkey.
Oh.
I have already been in 4 of these underground cities. It's absolutely amazing. In the beginning, when they discovered it, they believed, well, it has to do with the early Christians, because the Christians, they were hiding themselves because they were captured by the other communities. In the meantime, we know it has nothing to do with Christians. These underground cities, and you speak about cities, existed long time before Christianity. You know, there are no Christian symbols on the walls, no cross, no Jesus figures or whatever. So it's much, much older. And nobody has a reasonable answer, because in the meantime, we have 17 of these subterranean cities in Cappadocia, in Turkey, and they are all linked together. Between one city and another, there is a tunnel of 7 kilometers. So we have no idea why, for goodness, that the whole population, maybe of 1 million people, all of a sudden went underground. Was waiting, expecting something. Were they afraid of something which was flying above us? We don't know. But the fact is, we have these subterranean cities in Cappadocia, in Turkey.
Cray.
I know. We can't wait to see what you find out when you're there.
By the way, I'm next month, in October, I am in Virginia Beach.
Oh.
At this Edgar Cayce conference, which is on Friday, October 9th. And there I'm speaking the whole day. It's a whole day seminar with Erich Von Daniken. So I have in my archive, I have about 200,000 pictures, which I made throughout the world, including the subterranean cities, of course. And from these 200,000 people, I am maybe able to show 300-400. But it's absolutely amazing what you see there.
Well, my question for you is when you go through your, let's say, 200,000 pictures, how do you pick the ones that just mean so much to you? Because that's a lot of pictures.
You see, it all started in the 1954 when I was the first time in Egypt. You start to make pictures and pictures, and the years pass by, pass by. Then in the beginning you have photos, then you have slides and so on. Then the Electronic Society came. I have a well-organized office. It took some years that 2 boys in my office made of all these slides, went into the electronics, system. Now today we have it all in electronics. There is, for example, south of Lima in Peru, there is this plain of Nazca. Nazca is this desert. When you fly over it, you see first gigantic figures, in the ground, like fishes, monkeys, spiders, and so on. Then you fly a little higher. Then you see gigantic lines in the desert. Lines which look like airstrips. They start abruptly, they end abruptly. The biggest of it is 3.8 kilometers long. Now, what I want to come back, I have 5,000 pictures about this Nazca. Pictures which you never see on television, nowhere. You just, the public is wrongly informed. When you see something in television about Nazca, all they show you are the figures, like the fishes, the monkeys, the spiders, and all these things. They never show you these gigantic lines with cut-off mountaintops. It's incredible. Sometimes I have journalists or even archaeologists in my office, and we go into Nazca, in the electronic system, and they all say to me, Erich, but this is not Nazca. I say, oh, sorry, I made this throughout the last 20 years. So the mysteries continue, and I will fight for it, and sooner or later, these things must be shown on television. For the moment, they are in my books.
And so what do you think it is? Obviously, there's a lot of corporations and a lot of corporations that have politicians in their back pocket, but a lot of corporations also have pharmaceutical companies, for example. They say Monsanto, the Koch brothers, etc., have a lot of scientists in their back pocket. And so some members of the scientific community are scared to come forward like you are and tell the truth about things because there's this big backlash with the people who pay their bills.
Exactly. You see, scientists normally are honest and integer and intelligent personality normally, but they are all afraid of their colleagues at the university. I have so many discussions. I'm happy and thankful for it with scientists. For example, a professor in archaeology tells me something about the Maya. I was very happy and I said, thank you for this information. I will bring it in my next book. And of course, I will mention your name, that you give me this information. And then he said, no, please, Mr. Von Daniken, no, never mention my name. I say, why not? What's wrong? He says, my own colleagues will laugh at me, or they will throw me out, or they will say, what's wrong with the seriosity of this professor? So they are afraid. Some of them are afraid. Others, soon as they have a certain age and they do not need it again, many of them write their own books and come to public. And that's what I call the spirit of time. I'm trying to change a little bit of the spirit of time.
I think that's your title of a book right there.
I know. It sounds like a whole title of a
title.
series on like the History Channel or something like that. The True History Channel.
Yeah. Okay, so of all the sites you've been to, and you know, like Eddie's drawn to Machu Picchu, is there a site that you just seem to, when you're there, like you've had another life experience there before?
Yeah. In Egypt on the Nile, there is a place called Abydos. Now, Abydos is a temple constructed by Sethos. Sethos is a pharaoh of the third that was about 1,300 BC. Now, under the temple of Sethos, deep under it, in the desert, there is an older temple, much older than Sethos. They call it today the Osirion, the Osirion. You see, Osiris was the oldest god of Egypt. This old temple, again, is gigantic blocks, as in Pumapunku, as in Stonehenge in England, just cut, fit together. You need a planning, you need an engineering, etc. And it's definitely older than the temple of Sethos. So it's a mystery. When I go with tourists there, we always first look at the temple of Sethos with these wonderful pictures on the wall. Still today, they are in full colors. And then we go outside. And then I go down with the tourists and say, now, look, this wall and this platform here. It is older than Sethos because Sethos temple is above them. It's constructed higher than the old temple. So we have mysteries which archaeology has not solved. By the way, just in about 5 minutes, I have to run away.
Oh, no, that's fine. We're going to let you go here anyway. So before we get you out of here, again, where are you going to be on tour? I know you're going to be in Virginia Beach here.
Yes, I am in Virginia. That's the only place where I am in the United States. This is on Friday, October 9th. The whole day, this is the Edgar Gacy organization, you know, on Virginia Beach. That's the only thing in the United States. But I'm talking the whole day.
Oh,
That's
wow.
rough.
Are you going to be doing any other tours or even other research around the world?
Yes, but
anymore?
not in the United States. I just was in Peru some 3 weeks ago, and I was in Australia some 6 weeks ago. I'm always running around. In the moment, I'm in Switzerland. It's a wonderful, you would call it the American Indian summer.
Ah, yeah.
It's beautiful. We see the mountain. It's white and the green. The grass is down there. So I'm happy to be in my own home place. But in 3 days ago to Turkey, to these subterranean cities, and then in October I come to the United States to Virginia Beach.
Wow.
Well, it's.
And don't forget, I'm 80 years old.
I was going to
but
say.
I'm sorry to say it, I still drink some wine, and I enjoy it.
And that's what keeps you young. That's what keeps you young. Well, it's been an honor, and thank you so much for taking the time and doing this, because Eddie and I so appreciate it. And keep up the.
Maybe I see some of you in Virginia Beach.
I hope so. And if anybody wants to check it out, go to Daniken.com. It's D.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be in your show. Thank you for calling me.
All right,
Thank
you got
you,
it. Have a
Eric.
great day.
Bye-bye. Thank
All
you.
right.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye. And yeah, go to Daniken.com. That's DANIKEN.com, and you can check out all his books, his tours. If you here in the United States, and if you speak German, you can choose the German site too.
I know. What was your favorite part of the interview?
All of it.
Me too.
I just love him. I think it shows a guy. We didn't talk about this. That a guy that started off questioning religion, going through a rough time.
Life.
Yeah,
Religion,
with
life.
everything. And so, but now at 80 years old, and all he has to give now is his wisdom, and hearing him. It's like sitting and listening to your grandfather or your dad telling stories, and that's what I love about it.
I like that too. I also like that he is 80 and he's not stopping. He's
Right.
not slowing down. He's continuing to compound what information he's already given us, and I feel like constantly searching for more information to back up what he's already given the world.
Oh yeah.
And you can tell his heart almost breaks because he wants people to wake up
Right.
to
And to see, and I know his heart's breaking to see, human climate that's changing the climate of that Nazca.
yeah.
Is because of the climate change. It's actually starting to get a little more windier there. And it's starting to erase some of the work that's been there for thousands and thousands of years. ISIS is destroying stuff in Syria that's had been there for thousands and thousands of years. So people like him, I know their heart is just. And the humans, we have a tendency to destroy things.
Yes, we do. Well, limited thinking humans have a tendency
Yeah.
to destroy things for sure.
So, but we want to thank him and thank you guys for tuning in to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And make sure if you want to listen to this back, you can always listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and watch our video on YouTube. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have Unlock the Universe Within. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right here on Universal Broadcasting.